stands at a pivotal moment as Donald Trump's cryptic major announcement on Russia looms, sending ripples through NATO, Washington, and the front lines, with U.S. envoy Keith Kellogg arriving in Kiev amid renewed military pledges, including Patriot missiles, and Germany accelerating delivery of long-range weapons. The war teeters between escalation and uncertainty. As Moscow deepens alliances with Belarus, North Korea, and Iran, and China walks a diplomatic tightrope, Europe braces for potential shifts in the American commitment. NATO chief Rutte's urgent visit to Trump underscores the gravity of the hour. Will Washington reaffirm its resolve or redefine the battlefield? And I'm Salma El-Fiki, and welcome to Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
The Guardian has reported that Ukraine, after over 40 months of relentless war, stands at the edge of catastrophe. With Russia intensively advancing and Ukraine's forces drained, the West's fragmented response grows ever more inadequate. And Europe offers rhetoric. Germany cautiously steps in, but only the U.S. can tip the balance, a choice now clouded by Trump's erratic stance. Moscow, bolstered by allies like China, Iran, and North Korea, tightens its grip while Kiev struggles with shortages of weapons, manpower, and time. Macron and Starmer reaffirm support, yet lack the means to match promises. Trump, hesitating between aid and appeasement, remains an unpredictable force, easily swayed, dangerously unreliable. If Ukraine falls, it will mark a historic Western failure with seismic consequences. NATO might act differently, enforce air exclusion zones, and target Russian drones and tighten sanctions. The hour demands unity, resolve, and leadership before the dawn breaks over a broken Ukraine. And according to the Kiev Independent, the U.S. Special Envoy Keith Kellogg met the Ukrainian President Zelensky in Kiev, signaling a potential shift in Trump's Ukraine policy amid escalating Russian attacks and stalled peace efforts. The talks focused on bolstered air defense, joint weapons production, and tougher sanctions on Moscow. Trump announced new Patriot missile transfers to Ukraine, marking his first major military aid package, while the NATO chief Rutte arrived in Washington to coordinate Western strategy. Germany pledged further support, including possible Patriot systems, as Kiev struggles with critical air defense shortages. And despite Trump's fluctuating diplomacy and recent frustration with Putin, Russia continues its relentless attacks, with NATO unity tested and global alliances shifting. Ukraine braces as the war enters a dangerous new phase, one that could redefine Europe's security landscape. And the Moscow Times highlighted that China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi hailed Beijing's alliance with Moscow as strategically valuable amid deepening cooperation between the two powers. The remarks came during a high-level meeting with the Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, who arrived in Beijing after securing North Korea's unconditional support for Russia's war in Ukraine. Both sides emphasized strengthening comprehensive strategic coordination to counter global turbulence, discussing issues ranging from Ukraine to Gaza and Iran's nuclear program. Notably absent from Chinese statements was any mention of the U.S. relations, though Russia acknowledged it was discussed. And as China and Russia deepen ties, the united front challenges Western dominance in reshaping global alliances and complicating efforts to isolate Moscow over Ukraine. And Ukraine teeters as Trump's cryptic major announcement on Russia sparks global uncertainty. With NATO on edge, allies divided, and covert ops escalating, Kiev faces a new era of war, diplomacy, or division.
Ukraine stands at a crossroads as the war intensifies without ending. A major announcement from the U.S. President Donald Trump threatens to reshape the battlefield and global alliances. This week, Trump teased a major statement on Russia, a cryptic move that has rattled allies and raised questions about America's commitment to Ukraine. Meanwhile, U.S. Special Envoy Joseph Kellogg arrived in Kiev today, signaling Washington's continued but uncertain support. Sources say he delivered a message directly from Trump. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is set to meet Trump in Washington. The alliance is watching closely, fearing a shift in U.S. policy could fracture Western unity. Russia and Belarus continue to escalate. Moscow recently offered bonuses to Belarusian conscripts, deepening the joint war effort against Ukraine. China and Iran are also playing a growing role. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov visited Beijing last week, seeking support amid stalled peace talks and rising sanctions pressure. Back in Washington, the political battle over Ukraine intensifies. Despite Trump's renewed military support, a growing faction within his own party is pushing back, demanding an end to U.S. involvement. Meanwhile, bipartisan legislation gaining momentum would impose crushing sanctions on Russia, targeting its oil exports with a 500% tariff if peace talks don't materialize. Senator Elizabeth Warren warns it's meant to stop any on-again, off-again diplomacy with Putin. But critics argue it could backfire, weakening global energy markets and giving China more leverage in the crisis. In the shadows, the war intensifies. Recently, 2 FSB agents were killed after assassinating a Ukrainian intelligence officer, an escalation in covert operations. As Trump's shadow looms over Kiev, the world waits. Is this diplomacy or division?
And providing more analysis about the most recent concerning the Russia-Ukraine war and its fate, joining us from Kiev today is Mr. Ivan Us, the advisor at the Ukraine National Center, and from Washington, Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director. Welcome to Think Tank, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining me today. Let me start off with Mr. Us. As the U.S. Special Envoy Kellogg meets President Zelensky amid reports that Trump will resume military aid, how does this shift impact Ukraine's immediate defense capabilities, especially with Russia intensifying attacks on cities like Kiev?
Greetings to you, Salma. Greetings to all audience. Of course, greetings to Mr. Justin. So actually, of course, for Ukraine, it's very important that Donald Trump envoy Kit Kellogg visited Kiev, and as he announced the previous week, he planned to be in Ukraine at least for a whole week. So not for 2 or 3 days, but really for a larger period, 1 week. And of course, it's a signal, first of all, signal to Russia that the United States of America changing its approach. If before that, Donald Trump said that he need peace, and as for me, he was expected that President Putin, in his talk at the beginning of this month, said to him that he's stopping the war. But instead of that, Donald Trump here from President Putin phrased that he planned to increase the velocity of this war. He want to conquer more and more territory. And as we know from the President Donald Trump statement, he was shocking that. Donald Trump sharply criticized such President Putin position. And immediately after that, the United States of America at first resumed the military aid that they gave to our country. And that was on the pause before that. So the pause was over. And now Kit Kellogg, a special envoy in Kiev, and I think that it will be discussion of the future cooperation which according to the President Donald Trump means that the US will sell weapons to European Union first of all, and then they will give this weapon to Ukraine. So I think that Ukraine received weapon. That's very important for us. The United States of America will not do that for free, and Europe will be in part or will be shareholder of this process because now Ukraine looks like Hungary in 1956, when, as a former head of Hungarian broadcast system said, that say to them that we are dying for ourselves and for Europe. Now Ukraine like Hungary in 1956, so that's why you can help Ukraine. Thank you, Salma.
Well, Mr. Russell, with Trump now pledging Patriot missiles and possibly new funding for Ukraine, is this a reversal of his earlier skepticism or just merely a tactical recalibration ahead of the NATO talks, do you think?
Wow, that's a very complicated question, Selma. I don't think anybody knows. The consistency of the changes of the Trump administration's approach to Ukraine can give somebody whiplash. It changes on a daily basis. We just heard within the past hour that Donald Trump has said that prior to his meeting with Secretary General Root, that Denmark and Germany were going to be the sources of Patriot missiles to Ukraine. This is incredibly needed. What we've seen is Ukraine that is teetering on the brink of complete and total loss in this war. The drone attacks by Russia into Ukraine have taken a toll. The reality is this could have been prevented had Donald Trump not believed that Vladimir Putin was acting in good faith on this, which we now know is completely not the case. Donald Trump got played. If we had maintained a position of 110% support for Ukraine, whether we did it through NATO directly or however, I don't think we'd be in this position. What's happening now is Donald Trump has egg on his face. In a campaign promise where he said he was going to have this war ended within 24 hours because of this great relationship with Vladimir Putin played him like a violin. And that's now the situation we're dealing with. This puts both Europe in danger. It really makes it difficult for NATO to maintain a strength position in Eastern Europe. This is a very, very tenuous situation that we're in, but at least we're moving forward in protecting Ukraine, which is the first line of defense between Russia aggression and defending democracy in Europe.
Mr. Oos, Russia continues to pound Ukrainian cities with record numbers of drones and missiles. Does the promise of additional Patriot systems from the US, possibly via the NATO, offer the real relief, or is it just a symbolic reassurance, do you think?
Salma, the main problem of the Patriots is they can destroy the rockets. It's so important. Even today, Russia sent several rockets on Ukrainian territory. Yeah. But it was, first of all, in the south part of our country and at the eastern part, like Dnipro region. But as for drones, we need something other than Patriots. We need, first of all, special drones that destroy drones. In Ukraine, for last month or so, we start to use special drones that actually help to destroy mainly Iranian-made drones, Shaheds, that Russia used against Ukraine. They called it Geran, but in Ukraine we understand that they received this technology from Iran. And actually, when in those drones they changed some spare parts from Iranian-made to China-made, those drones becomes more actually effective and more dangerous for Ukrainian people. That's why actually there is some increasing criticism of China from Ukrainian side. But as for those drones, of course, we need most, as I said, special system. Of course, drone first of all that destroys them, but so some other system, because as I said, Patriots, it's against rockets. Against rockets, very effective. But Russia sent 20, 30 rockets. It's too much, but it's not 700 drones like they sent several days before at one of the traditional night attack on Ukrainian cities. So that's why we should understand that drones have the main danger in the large quantity. And mass drones attacks means that we should be ready to defend our sky from these mass attacks. And it means that we need a lot of things that can help to us, but theoretically it's possible. And if Patriots defend us from the rockets, the other things I think can help us with drones. Thank you, Salma.
Well, Mr. Russell, Trump declared his disappointment in Putin, but he gave no details on his upcoming Russia statement. Um, should we interpret this as frustration or just the start of a broader strategic pivot?
Well, I think one leads to the other, Selma. I mean, what we're seeing is Donald Trump again. He's got egg on his face. He's not been able to uphold his promise of closing out this war. Obviously, every time that he's gone to Vladimir Putin tells him roses and rainbows are happening. Putin starts another drone attack. There's a lot of situations that have been unraveling for Trump and their uh, policy on Ukraine over the past 4 weeks. The bottom line here is that this situation, the fact that Donald Trump has been playing into Vladimir Putin's strategy of telling Trump nice things and then going in and just battering Kyiv and Ukrainian people is working for not only Kyiv but for Beijing, for Tehran, and for Pyongyang. I don't think that, and to my Ukrainian colleagues' point, Patriot missiles are great against rockets, but what Vladimir Putin and the Russian defense and the Russian military have realized is that they can do a lot of damage with drone attacks. These drones that have offensive capabilities have created such havoc and has broken the morale of the people of Ukraine as well as the Ukrainian defense forces. And they're easy to make. They're rapidly assembling them in mass quantities in Russia, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're not seeing support from China on this. That being the case, this is an all hands on deck situation for NATO. Not only is the U.S. going to have to up its game in providing, the latest and state of the art technology to defend Ukraine, but the other NATO members, the European countries that have defense manufacturers, such as EADS, BAE, Rheinmetall, Leonardo, all major NATO, even Saab has fighters jets that can support this, and the supplies to back them up. Until NATO comes together and says we are now at a critical point, we are going to defend Ukraine against Russia aggression. Until that happens, and until Donald Trump realizes that this is making Moscow and Beijing more powerful and us less sustainable in the world community, we've got a big problem on our hands.
Mr. Oost, the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome secured over $4 billion funds. Can reconstruction efforts actually proceed and meaningfully while cities are being bombarded still?
Salma, I think that it's hard to build, to make reconstruction when you have a full-scale war, because you could rebuild something and that will be destroyed in several days after that. So I think it's silly. I think that those conference, it's the fourth conference after conference in, before that it was Lugano, then it was London, then it was Berlin, and now it's at Rome. So the first conference, it's rather about constant talks about necessity to help Ukraine after the end of full-scale war, because someone thinks that when everyone stops shooting, it will be the end of the story. No, it will not be the end of the story. The Second World War demonstrated that to return the Europe to normal life, the Europe needs a Marshall Plan from the United States of America that helped to Europe to return to normal life. The same situation with Ukraine. I think that everything that we discussed at this Ukraine Rebuild Conference, it's like talks about Marshall Plan 2.0, like how to return Ukraine to live in the world without the war, but after this war, after enormous damage. And it was very important in this conference in Rome that the Chancellor Merz, Chancellor of Germany, said that Russia should compensate to Ukraine 500 billion euros a loss that Ukraine received due to Russian attack. Of course, it's his assessment because in Ukraine we have different assessment of the damage. The Kiev School of Economics that closed to some U.S. universities, they told in previous August actually about 1,164,000,000,000 damage of Russia, but of course they have their special calculation. Now they are rather more operating by the figures of Chancellor Merz and the World Bank that all said about 500 billion euros. And it's very important to understand that Russia could return to the normal life not after the end of war, but after compensation. It's very important because Russians should understand that every time they make attack to Ukraine by rockets, by drones, they make damage. And this damage, they should compensate in future. So they increase their debts. Understanding that you constantly increase your debts should influence on Russian allies to stop this war because they could be in such big debts that I'm not sure that they can preserve their property all over the world. For example, their big embassy in Geneva. I think that Russia should understand that they could lose that asset and some other assets throughout the world, and not only in the world, but in Russia actually too, if they want to return to normal life. Thank you, Salma.
Mr. Russell, the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte is visiting Washington at the moment during a critical moment. How likely is that he'll secure a firm commitment from Trump on the sustained military aid and air defense systems?
I think, Selma, he's got no choice. He's going to have to sell this as a frontline defense, life or death for Europe and for NATO. We're talking about rebuilding and cost of rebuilding. This is putting the cart before the horse, Selma. I mean, we're not even sure that Ukraine, as we know it, is going to be in existence in 6 months. And then the concern starts with, where does Putin and Beijing and this alliance stop? Do they go further? Do they go into places like Kazakhstan, Kurdistan? Do they go into Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan? Do they go into places like Poland, Scandinavia, the Baltic states? The Baltic states have been concerned about this for quite a long time, and now they're seeing it as a possible reality at their back door. Secretary General Rutte's got a real big mission. This could be the most important meeting that he could possibly have in his short, brief term as Secretary General, and that is to get Donald Trump and the U.S. to get 100% behind a comprehensive, unified NATO strategy to defend Ukraine against what has been proven as an unprovoked, illegal, and just brutal attack against a sovereign neighbor country by Russia against Ukraine. If Secretary General Rutte cannot convince the U.S. that we've got to go all in on defending Ukraine, I think we're going to have a big change in the future of what the world looks like in a very short amount of time.
Well, let me ask you both gentlemen the same question. Mr. Russell and Mr. Ouz, how, in your opinion, each of you, please, briefly can tell me, how do you think the war can end between Ukraine and Russia? It's been going on for years, and different alliances, and in your opinion, let me start with Mr. Ouz. How do you think, what's your take regarding ending the war between Russia and Ukraine?
Salma, in July 1991, no one believed that USSR will disappear in a month, but it disappeared, as we know from history. The same situation with Russia. Economic pressure on Russia, plus military support to Ukraine, creates a situation when for Russia it will be very hard to be in this war and to preserve their state. That's why I think it will be the end of this war. It will not be in decades. I think that next year theoretically could make a dot, just because Russia will now have sources to exist like the USSR in 1991. Thank you, Salma.
And Mr. Russell, what's your take?
It's going to end diplomatically, Salma. This is going to have to be a diplomatic resolution.
So you think it's going to be diplomatically through maybe the NATO nations, or?
No, well, I think that I think it's look. I think it's going to have to be done diplomatically. There's going to have to be some way that there is a diplomatic solution. Sanctions. I mean, the idea of getting into a full-blown war, shooting war between NATO and Russia is just mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
As is the case in diplomacy, not everybody's going to get what they want. Is there going to be a sliver of Eastern Ukraine that's going to have to go back to Russia? Probably. Is Russia going to have to realize that they're going to have to coexist? Absolutely. This has to be done diplomatically. Any other result is just going to escalate, and it's going to be bad for the world.
Do you agree with this opinion, Mr. Ouz, with what Mr. Russell is saying?
Of course, the diplomacy should play it, but you know that Russia demonstrated they understand only force, unfortunately, and the attempt to talk with them in a diplomatic way led to the fact that Russia thinks that it's a weakness for Russia when you talk from diplomatic point perspective. They think, oh, you are weak, that we should not do that, as Vladimir Putin likes. But when he understands force, when he sees force, for him it's the horse of another color. He understands that it's better to go to agreement because peace through force is one of the best kind of peace that you could achieve. That's why in Ukraine we see that Donald Trump and his administration make more debt on such kind of peace than any other kind of achieving this peace. Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome. Mr. Russell, let me ask you, the Republican leaders are pushing a bipartisan sanctions bill, and they're targeting the Russian oil buyers with 500% tariffs. Do you think this is a viable tool to pressure Moscow, or could it just fracture global energy markets and empower China?
No, I think your take, Salma, on the latter of that is correct. I think what it's going to do is it's going to destabilize the energy market. Look, in China, China and the surrounding, states that are aligned with Moscow, as well as the BRIC alliance, depends on that Russian oil. And it includes even trading partners with the U.S. You take out, you put additional sanctions on Russian oil, it's going to impact our trading partners in Brazil and India. And not that we have a lot of great standing now because of tariffs. They may say we don't care. But the bottom line here is that, something's got to happen. I don't think that if you had asked me 6 months ago, Salma, would we be in this position? I would have said absolutely not. There's no way that the U.S. is going to allow Russia's aggression against Ukraine to stand, and we would not back full defense of Ukraine. I've been wrong before on this. I can tell you right now, I hope I'm wrong because, as my colleague in Kiev points out, while a shooting war is possible, NATO does not want to get into a prolonged shooting war. That will escalate incredibly quickly, and that could cause the loss of innocent lives. This has to be done diplomatically. Sanctions, some sanctions do work. I hope it does. But right now, we're in uncharted waters right now. I don't think anybody has a true solution. We're going to play this day by day.
Mr. Ouz, following the assassination of a senior Ukrainian intelligence officer by the Russian FSB agents, how do you think are the covert operations shaping the war's next phase? And do you think Ukraine is prepared for escalating the hybrid threats?
Russia murdered Ukrainian colonel in the center of Kiev, not far away actually from the place where I'm living. It's demonstrations that Russia could organize the operation inside Ukraine. So Ukraine responds immediately. We find those persons who organized murdering of our intelligence service colonel, and we murdered them. I think that it's demonstration to other the same people who are waiting for the orders from Russia that if they decided to make a murdering in the Ukrainian territory, they could not expect that there will be court. They could be murdered because now we have a war. And according to war law, martial law, actually there will be response.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm running out of time. And that was Mr. Ivan Us, the advisor at the Ukraine National Center, and Mr. Justin Thomas Russell, the Global Foreign Policy Center Executive Director. Thank you both for your special insights and this valuable discussion. Thank you so much. And as Trump's policy hangs in the balance, Ukraine fights for survival amid deepening global tensions. The world watches. Will diplomacy prevail, or will chaos redefine the battlefield? And that brings us to the end of today's episode of Think Tank, which always unveils the complexities of our changing world. And thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.